In the heart of Simpsonville, South Carolina, a community known for its small-town charm and neighborly warmth, life usually moved at a calm, gentle pace. This was the kind of place where people waved from their porches, where families shared Sunday dinners, and where crime was something you might hear about on the news but rarely saw on your own streets. It was the last place anyone expected to be shaken by a story of betrayal, obsession, and cold-blooded murder. Yet beneath the surface of this seemingly quiet town, a storm was brewing, one that would end in tragedy and leave a family broken forever. Katie Blauvelt was just 22 years old, a tiny young woman, barely over 5 feet tall, but her presence was larger than life. She had a heart full of love, especially for animals, and a free spirit that drew people to her wherever she went. Katie's family and friends adored her, describing her as the kind of person who could make anyone laugh and feel welcome. She wasn't just a daughter or a sister. She was the light in the room, the one everyone loved to be around. Her story seemed destined for happiness. When she met John Blauvelt, a U.S. Army recruiter, it appeared that she had found stability and security. John was older, disciplined, respected in the community, and to outsiders, he looked like the perfect catch. A soldier with medals, a man in uniform, someone who carried himself with confidence. Katie, full of hope and love, believed she had found her partner for life. They quickly married, dreaming of a family and a future together. But the perfect picture soon began to crack. Behind closed doors, the marriage unraveled almost as quickly as it began. John wasn't the stable man Katie thought he was. He had a dark side, a dangerous temper, and a need for control. He surrounded himself with teenagers, throwing parties filled with drugs and alcohol, behavior far from what people expected from military recruiter. Among the teens who gravitated toward him was a 17-year-old girl named Hannah Thompson. She became infatuated with John, willing to do whatever he asked, desperate for his attention and love. For Katie, this was unbearable. She hadn't married a man to become the third wheel in her own marriage. The relationship grew toxic. Arguments replaced affection, and violence soon entered their home. According to reports, John pointed a gun at Katie's head, threatening not only her, but also her family. It was a chilling sign of what was to come. Eventually, Katie moved out, seeking distance and safety, though her beloved dog Jupiter remained at the house, a reason that sometimes pulled her back into John's orbit. Despite a restraining order, the connection between them wasn't fully severed. But John never forgave her for leaving. To him, Katie had destroyed everything: his marriage, his home life, and most painfully, his military career. Because of the domestic violence charges, the Army suspended him, stripped away the role he had loved, and placed him behind a desk. His future as a soldier was shattered. To John, there was only one person to blame: Katie. And his anger soon twisted into a deadly obsession. On October 24th, 2016, Katie left her job at PetSmart and vanished. Her phone went silent, her friends couldn't reach her, and her family was consumed with fear. Her mother, Patty, reported her missing, but deep down she felt an unshakable dread. Something was terribly wrong. 2 days later, in the dark hours past midnight, the nightmare became real. In an abandoned farmhouse known as a hangout for teenagers, Katie's body was discovered hidden inside a concrete box in the basement. She had been stabbed in the neck, the knife blade left lodged inside her. Her body had been dragged, folded, and discarded like trash. It was a scene straight out of a horror film, but this was no fiction. Investigators immediately turned their attention to John. When they broke the news of Katie's death to him, his reaction was disturbingly cold. He didn't ask the wasting the truth to make Hannah believe she was the reason for his crime. She later recalled that he confessed the awful details, telling her how the last thing Katie questions a grieving husband might ask, not "Where did you find her?" or "How did she die?" Instead, his only concern was whether he was being charged with a crime. To detectives, it was clear John knew exactly what had happened because he was the one who had done it. But before police could build a solid case, John disappeared. He fled the state, taking Hannah Thompson with him, and a manhunt began. To law enforcement, This wasn't just any fugitive. John had military training, combat survival skills, and a mindset that made him unpredictable and dangerous. If he could kill his own wife, what else was he capable of? While on the run, John and Hannah traveled across the country, spotted in Texas, New Mexico, and eventually Oregon. They lived out of a vehicle, begged for money, and tried to survive in the wilderness. Hannah, barely more than a child, was manipulated into believing this was some twisted love story. John told her he had killed Katie for her, twisting the truth to make Hannah believe she was the reason for his crime. She later recalled that he confessed the awful details, telling her how the last thing Katie said was that if he let her go, she wouldn't call the police. But he didn't let her go. Instead, he silenced her forever. Months passed, and Hannah eventually broke away, returning home. She gave police fragments of information, though at first she lied to protect John. Over time, the weight of the truth began to break her down. Yet John remained out there, living under false names, slipping through the cracks, and taunting investigators with his ability to disappear. For years, the case remained unsolved. Katie's family grieved without justice, haunted by the thought that her killer might never be caught. But in 2022, a breakthrough finally came. Hannah, older and no longer under John's spell, revealed she had been in contact with him for years. With her help, investigators traced him to Medford, Oregon, where he had been living quietly with another woman who believed she knew him as Ben Klein. He did odd jobs, cared for her pets, and presented himself as a normal partner, hiding in plain sight. On July 20th, 2022, after nearly 6 years on the run, U.S. Marshals surrounded the house. When John stepped outside, shirtless, they moved in. Shock flashed across his face, but he dropped to the ground quickly. He tried to deny his identity, claiming he was Ben Klein, but fingerprints don't lie. Within minutes, the truth was confirmed. John Blauvelt was finally in custody. Inside the home, marshals found a loaded handgun on a nightstand, a chilling reminder of how easily the arrest could have turned violent. His unsuspecting girlfriend was devastated, realizing the man she loved had been hiding a monstrous secret. Back in South Carolina, Katie's family finally felt the weight of justice moving. At trial in 2024, prosecutors laid out the evidence: the knife blade, the journal John had written while on the run, and the testimony of Hannah Thompson, who admitted to helping John hide evidence and flee. Though her credibility was challenged, she provided key details that only the killer could have known. John's defense tried to argue that there was no DNA linking him to the murder, that the journal was fantasy, and that Hannah was lying. But the jury wasn't convinced. After 4 days of testimony and 5 hours of deliberation, they returned a verdict: guilty of murder. John Blauvelt was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Katie's family, it was a bittersweet victory. Justice had come, but nothing could bring Katie back. The young woman who had loved animals, dreamed of a family, and brought joy to everyone around her had been taken far too soon. And as for Hannah Thompson, she faced her own reckoning, charged with obstruction and accessory crimes for the role she played. Some saw her as a victim, manipulated by a man nearly a decade older who had groomed her since she was a teenager. Others saw her as someone who had known too much for too long and failed to come forward when it mattered most. Katie's story is a reminder of how love can turn into obsession, how trust can turn into betrayal, and how even the safest towns can hide unimaginable darkness. Behind every smiling face, every uniform, every handshake, there can be secrets waiting to be exposed. Katie's memory lives on not through the crime that ended her life, but through the people who loved her, her mother, her sister, her friends, who will never forget her laughter, her kindness, and her free spirit. And John Blauvelt will spend the rest of his days behind prison walls, with nothing left but the memory of the life he destroyed. Because in the end, evil can run, it can hide, it can even disguise itself in the uniform of a soldier. But justice has a way of finding the truth. And when it does, there is no escape.